Now what happens when there's other stuff happening to the graph? Like what does it look like? Well, I'm only going to do sine functions for this, but cosine functions follow all the same rules as sine functions, except cosine starts at 1 instead of at 0. The sine function, when stuff happens to it, is when you have an a multiplying to sine, a w multiplying to x, an h subtracting from x, and then a k adding to it. And yesterday we spent a lot of time, actually yesterday and the day before, looking at what these different letters do to our graph. We saw that the a changes the max and the min. It makes the max go higher or lower. It makes the min go lower or higher. The w changes our period. Whatever's multiplying to the x is changing the period. The h moves it left or right. It's like a shift to the left or a shift to the right. And then the k moves the function up and down. I right now just want to focus in on this w because that's kind of confusing. So let's look at this function right here. We're going to say y equals sine, and I'm going to put a 2 right here. 2 times x. We don't have all the other letters in here. There is no a. Well, there is an a. It's 1, but 1 doesn't change anything. There's nothing subtracting from the x. Remember the h would be inside parentheses with our x, and there's nothing adding on the outside here, and that would be your k. So there's no shifting up or down. There's no phase shift. There's no shifting left or right. So you can say none right here because there's no h. I'm going to put an h right here just so that you guys know. But the period does change. Our amplitude doesn't change because that's what the a does. The a changes the amplitude. And our y-intercept doesn't change. That's your k. Your k will change the y-intercept. It'll shift it up. It'll shift it down. It doesn't go up or down, so we're staying at 0. So what's our period? Well, to define our period, yeah, you're right. You get 2 pi, which is the regular period of the sine function. And then you're going to multiply that by the w. Well, the reciprocal of the w. So it's kind of like dividing it by the w. So you put the 1 underneath the 2 pi, and you get 2 pi divided by 2, and that equals pi. So my period is pi. All right, so now let's get down to the gritty part, the graphing. Before we put the period right here, and it was 2 pi, but now the period is pi. And so how are we going to find all these other x values right here? Well, there's 4 sections, so we're going to take pi and divide it by 4. I can't simplify that. It's already simplified, so that's what we're going to count by. We're going to go pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and then this would be 4 pi over 4, but that would simplify to just be pi, so we don't need to write this. All right. Oh, and this one right here simplifies. What is 2 pi over 4 simplified to? Pi over 2. So let's change that to say pi over 2. It's good to have, actually, in your notes, I probably would keep it as 2 pi over 4 and just write right underneath it pi over 2 so you know that you're simplifying it. Okay, so that's what's different is the period. We just changed the period. Now the actual sine curve still follows the same rules. It goes center line, max, center line, min, center line. So it would take on the same shape. The max is 1 and the min is -1. Now when we put it over here on this graph, a little stuff changes. And we're not going all the way to 2 pi now. We're going to just pi to complete a cycle. So this is the finish. This is the first period. Here is pi over 2. Let's go point by point. Where is pi over 4 in here? Pi over 4 would be between 0 and pi over 2. That's the halfway point. So it'll be right here. Well, what do these tick marks for right there? Well, that guy is pi over 6, and that guy is 2 pi over 6, or you could say that he is pi over 3. And all of these should look familiar. Those are your what are they called? Reference angles in the first quadrant. All right, and that's helpful to know for later on that those count by pi over 6. So this is pi over 4 right here, and pi over 4 goes up to 1, and then at pi over 2 we're back at the center line. So we go up to 1 right here, then we're back at the center line, and then we have 3 pi over 4. which is in my way, so I'm going to just do that. And then we get back to the center line. So our graph looks like this. Then we got to do it one more time. We're at max, center line, min, center line. How many periods do we have within 2 pi? Looks like we have 2 periods. Now because we didn't have a k on this one, the y-intercept didn't change. The x-intercepts are easy for us to list, and I would like it if you guys did list those. In this one, the x-intercepts are 0, pi over 2, and then, what was that, 3 pi over 4, then pi. Then we have even more after that. We have, what is that? That's pi. Wait, 3 pi over 4 is not one of them. 3 pi over 4 gives us our minimum. Silly goose. Did you just say silly goose? I did. What's it to you? Gotta erase those. Then we have, that's just pi. And after that, so that's 0, pi over 2, pi, and then that is 3 pi over 2. And the last one is 2 pi. Our maximums are at 1 and at -1. You only just need the y values there.